Hello, everyone. Welcome to another virtual event with Mysterious Galaxy. I am Nick, the director of events and digital marketer of the store. Today, we have two wonderful authors here for you, but we are celebrating, first and foremost, Isabelle's The Witchery. Hello, Sophie.
Hi.
For those of you who may not know, Isabelle, also Sophie, is a reader, writer, and hoarder of books. Her short story break was featured in the anthology FORESHADOW, stories to celebrate the magic of reading and writing. Her latest novel, which is also her debut young adult novel, is this one right here, The Witchery. And in conversation, of course, we have Aiden Thomas. Hey, Aiden.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. As someone who has read this book ages ago, it's very excited to be able to talk to people about it.
Aiden is a New York Times bestselling author with an MFA in creative writing from Mills College, originally from Oakland, California. They now make their home in Portland, Oregon. You probably know them best for their books, The Cemetery Boys, Lost in Never Woods, and upcoming The SUNBEARER Trials, which we're very excited because we're going to be doing an in-store event for that one. So yay.
Yay.
For those of you who have not yet got your copy of The Witchery here, how dare you? Do it now. There's a link below that'll take you to our website where you can do that. And you will also eventually get a signed book plate by Isabelle. Shipping the way they are, sometimes we get them late. So, but we do have that in the webpage that they'll be a little late. And then if you have any questions you have for Sophie or Aiden or both, because we like group questions, you can submit them below under the Ask a Question button, and they'll be asked later on the program. I've done enough gabbing. I'm going to disappear and leave it to these two wonderful authors, but I will see everyone later in the program.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sophie, I am so excited to be doing this event with you. Like I said, I had the incredible opportunity of reading an early version of The Witchery, and I feel like I have been waiting my whole life in order for this book to come out. Is that
Me
how
too.
it is for you?
Same. When you said like I've been waiting to talk to people about it, I'm like, yeah, same for years and years and years. But I'm super happy to be here. I know. I'm happy to be here with you. Like, nice to meet you virtually. Thank you for reading. Thank you for blurbing. I love Cemetery Boys. That is a book that I push to my teens. I'm also a teen librarian. I know we'll do like bios and stuff, but like that's a book that I hold dear to my heart. It's so fun. So I was so excited when you agreed to like blurb and do this little event. So
thank you so much.
Nice to meet you. Of course.
Yeah, it's so nice to like see you in person. This is really fun.
Yeah.
So like to get us kicked off, to get us started for folks who don't know, could you give us a synopsis of what The Witchery is about?
Yes, of course. So, and also Aiden forgot their copy, so I'm just
listen. No, I didn't forget it. A friend stole it.
A friend stole a copy of the book, but it's okay. The Witchery is my debut novel. I'm so used to saying, and it comes out July 26th. Pre-order it, get a copy then. It's out now. It is about a town called Halesford, Florida. A swampy town in which every autumn these monstrous wolves come out of the swamp and try to hunt people down. In this town, Halesford, there are witches, there are non-magical mundanes, and they all live together. So it's a little bit more like True Blood, not in like adult content, but in the idea that like everyone knows that this paranormal world exists. So your friend could be a witch or your neighbor could be a witch, and they're out in the open. So at the Mesmore Coven Academy, there are 4 witches who are trying to break this curse, and they team up with a pair of mundanes who have no idea what they're getting into in order to stop the wolves once and for all. So it's paranormal, there's some horror, it's funny, it's got a big cast if you like ensemble casts. I, for some reason, wrote 6 POVs, you know, as it happens with my debut. Learning the hard way. But it's a lot of fun, and it's like my dream book. So I'm so happy that it's finally out.
Yeah, and it is really fun. I think that's a really important thing to like push about The Witchery, and something that I really connected with is that it's very scary and there's a lot of dark elements and themes that we're going over, but it's also a good time and very funny. I will say that I had a little bit of emotional damage because I'm terrified of wolves. So once I started reading it, and I was like, oh no.
My worst fears.
Yeah, I was like, well, here we go. But yeah, it was an absolute blast. And I think what I'm really curious about personally was, what was the inspiration originally for the Witchery?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of authors will talk about, like, when I was a kid, I read this, and I didn't see myself in books, and that's also the same for me. Growing up, I mostly read fantasy or adventure or mysteries. I was someone who was not allowed to go out on the weekends and do some things where I had a very limited social life, and I was a bit of a homebody. So of course I turned to books, and 13-year-old me was so dramatic, oh, my life is so boring. I'm going to read all the fantasy novels so that I can see teens and, adults too, doing all these magical fun things. So fantasy is kind of where my home is. I was inspired by things like The Craft, even things like the Ocean's movies. I love big casts. I love anything that has okay, this person has this power, this person has this power, and this person has this power. How are they going to come together to defeat the evil? Watched a lot of Dragon Ball Z growing up too, and that's but anime really informed the type of media that I still love now and what I want to write. So a mixture of just my love of witchcraft, powerful girls, powerful Black girls, and having boy characters in YA. And I think you do this really well also, who aren't into toxic masculinity and stuff. Right. Yeah, I wanted to write these soft boys. They didn't make it onto the cover, but that's okay. You'll see them in there, who join the group and get some time to shine as well. So
yeah, and it's so fun. And what I really liked, and you kind of touched base on this with the 6 POVs, was something that I thought was so well done, and how you managed to have this large cast of characters, but I felt reading it that I really understood, and there was nuance, and everyone has really distinct personalities and goals. And I thought that was really cool. As someone who is currently attempting to play with just 2 POVs, I have no idea still how you pulled this off. So I'm endlessly impressed. And speaking of the main cast, could you introduce us to the main characters for the story?
Yes, absolutely. So we have 3 witches who are at Mesmore. They go to the school, they've been going to the school, and they're the ones who are first scheming to break the curse. We have Iris, who is the prickly necromancer. I always say she has a black heart of gold. She's very standoffish. You look at her and you're I don't want to mess with this girl, but she actually does want to help her friends and herself to stay safe. And she also, calls spirits. Spirits talk to her, and she is trying to figure out the right spirit to call to end the haunting season. And then we have Jayla, who's someone called her the head witch in charge. She's the very sociable. She's doing all the extracurriculars. She's your most the most likely to succeed. She knows all of the magic. She's super friendly and Southern, but she's also got this kind of need to protect her magic, and it makes her a little bit cutthroat. She's on this quest for power, and that might get her into trouble. We have Talia, who is the Green Witch, so she does the healing magic and the plant magic. But she's got a very dark past. And it's funny, I was talking to Ryan LaSala earlier this week about this book, and he was talking about how Talia, you would expect that character to be very soft because they've got the healing magic, and Talia is she's got some stuff in her past she's trying to run from, is what I'll say. And then lastly, for the witches, we have Logan, the baby witch. Her magic is very unpredictable and explosive. So she kind of gets roped into the group for this one specific reason. And she needs to figure out how to control her magic in time to help save the town. And then we have our 2 mundane boys, Trent, who is my just darling boy. He's Black, British, funny, charming. But he gets roped in because his mother was a witch and she died under some suspicious circumstances. He's trying to figure out what was behind that, and he kind of gets roped in. Lastly, we have Matthew, who is the most mundane to ever mundane. He's got no magic, no connection to witchery, or so he thinks, and quickly discovers early on in the book that there's something about him and one of the witches in the group. And so he needs to figure out what's going on there. Sparks may fly or they won't. I don't know. You'll have to see.
You'll have to read the book to see.
Yeah.
Is there, like, out of this group, is there a character that was the easiest for you to write? And conversely, was there one that was, like, really hard to write?
Oh man, I think Iris was probably the easiest. So she's the Death Witch because she was a character from the beginning. Like, you know, some things change over time. Like when you're drafting, you know, when you get an agent and then when you get a book deal, like so much of the story sometimes changes. And Iris was one who stayed the same. So I think that character just sort of spoke to me. If I was a witch, I would not be a Death Witch. That is scary. But it was so fun to write her, like this character who's so unlike myself. So she was a lot of fun, and I think I had an easy time with her.
I think this is probably pretty obvious, but Iris is my favorite out of all of them.
Is so many people's favorites. I've had people say, like, I know who your favorite character is, and I'm like, they're all my babies. I love them all.
It's like, what are you talking about?
I know. But she is kind of like was one of like the first ones that really came fully formed into my head. So I think that's part of it. Hardest to write. Logan was kind of tough. Someone called her a token white girl of the group, and I kind of laughed. But you know, I identify with her in many ways. She's also the one who's like learning her magic, so she's not having a lot of fun in the beginning, and sometimes she made some decisions that I'm finding readers have been very critical of. So she's kind of that one who I had to work to make her relatable, and even if you don't like her, I wanted you to understand where she was coming from or why she made the choices she made, and sometimes that's a little bit hard. So yeah, it was a little bit tricky to get into her head sometimes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like, speaking of characters that you can relate to, which character do you relate to the most?
I always say I'm a mixture of like Talia and Trent. So Talia is like your. Well, I don't have a dark and bloody past.
You're like, not that I know of. I don't think.
But she's like that introverted green witch, but she's very kind of like, she's quiet. She's got like a dog at her side. She has her familiar, and she's like sort of studious. Like she just wants to be left alone, kind of, but she can't because of.
I relate to that.
Life. Yeah. Right? And then you have this comment by okay, sounds like exactly what someone with a dark and bloody past would say. Yeah,
it's true.
You know, I'm not hiding anything, guys. And then I think I'm a mixture of Talia and Trent. So Trent's kind of like the fun, like he's here to have a good time, not a long time. Like he just wants to like get everyone together and make everyone feel better. And he's so funny. And that's like me saying that I'm so funny and cool, but he is. And so I think I'm kind of like a mixture of them somewhere.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like Iris is obviously my favorite.
Who are you most like? I was gonna say, like, who do you think you're most like since you have read the book?
I think Trent. I think like when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I want to hang out with this kid. And it's because I think we're very similar, especially like sense of humor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like I'm just here for a good time. Like jokes abound.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that one was for me. And he had some really, really good scenes. And again, the banter was impeccable, I would say. And speaking of, what was the scene that was the most fun to write?
So I've actually talked about this in a few other events, but there's a scene. So in part one of the book, part one ends with this big thing happening, and the witches and the mundanes, the group, they've come together. So all 6 are together, and they've done something that might get them into a lot of trouble. So in this world, if you use your magic in improper ways, you can become hexbound, which is essentially a governing body taking away your witchery. And the girls obviously do not want that. But they've done this thing involving, you know, death magic, forbidden spells, and they need to figure out what to do with this problem. And they're in Talia's cabin in the woods, sort of, and they're all kind of arguing on how to solve this problem. And it's a moment where, okay, the 6 are together for one of the first times, and they're all arguing their case, and they're all kind of making their morals known. It's part of the reason why I like writing YA is writing coming of age and figuring out like what is right, what is wrong. So you've got the characters who are like, this is the bloody path, but it's the right path. And then you have the characters who are like, but no, we need to do the right thing and be good. And it's just funny to see how they all try to like stand up and speak to their minds about this. So it was a lot of fun because it was almost like a test for me. Like, did I write these characters well enough?
Yeah.
Does this work? Are they in character? And so I love that. I love that scene so much.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And you're totally right. It's a really good like crash course on like where everyone is aligned and the potential conflicts that are going to come from that discussion. Without spoilers, what was the hardest scene to write? For me personally, it's always the end of a book. So I don't know if you have a similar experience.
I think the hardest scenes are always like action scenes. So, you know, in this book, you know, it's fantasy, it's, you know, there are these murderous wolves. I don't think it's a spoiler. I think a reader would assume some of these wolves are going to come face to face with like the witches and whatnot. So
it would be very sad if they didn't.
Right? And it's climactic.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time, like I can visualize action scenes or like fight scenes so clearly in my head. And sometimes just getting it onto the page can be difficult. I'm like, how do I make sure I'm tracking the character's movements? I want it to read as badass as it like looks in my head. So that's something with writing fantasy and also like, it's not like not even in this book, but other fantasy I'm trying to write where there are these epic fight scenes. I'm like, this is so difficult. So I do a lot of like watching YouTube, like watching the best fight scenes from movies and like choreographing those and then putting them into words. So it's a little bit different, but I am pretty happy with how they turned out. So
yeah, I mean, I would have never guessed that was what you had the most trouble with, like a hands down. It's funny because you are writing these big action scenes and you have so many characters to keep track of. I think people don't understand how difficult that is. And I was listening to N.K. Jemison's masterclass, and she said how she watched in order to like choreograph fight scenes, she would watch her favorite video game cutscenes, and that's actually something that I've been doing. Yeah, for like
that's cool.
Yeah, and so I've been doing that with the book that I'm writing right now, which also has a very large cast. And another trick that I did, my really wonderful friend Israel 3D printed me little tokens for all 10 of my characters, and then so I can put them on the table and like map them out and literally move them around, because it's so, like you said, it's so easy to lose track of somebody, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, where's John? He hasn't been here for the last like 3 pages.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go steal my niece's dolls because I don't have 3D printed tokens, so I'm just going to go like, I'm sorry, I need these, girl. I gotta plan out this scene. The video game cutscene thing is interesting. I mean, I'm playing like Ace Attorney right now, so I don't know that I could do that. But like watching. What does it say? Objection? Yeah. I'm like, I don't know that that's helpful. But yeah, going on YouTube and watching like movie fight scenes, I think along a similar vein of like watching it and then trying to put it to words. But the token thing, or like figures, that's a really good piece of advice for this.
Yeah, I'm a very visual person, so just having little like things that I can play with makes it way easier. So when you were writing the book, because obviously this is a very long, drawn out process, you've spent a lot of time with these characters in this world and kind of crafting it into what you want it to be. One of my favorite things to do is to hide little references or Easter eggs throughout my stories. Do you have any of those in the Witchery?
I have a few. Like my mom's name is in the book, and then when she was reading it, she was like, oh, and I had forgotten also, because you know sometimes you forget. I mean, I do at least. I forget some of like my minor throwaway characters, and so she was like, oh, I just read this chapter in the book. I was like, okay, and she's like, and this character came in, and I was like, oh yeah, like I named the character after you. So there's some of that. Like I'm trying to think. There are some references that aren't really Easter eggs. There are some like pop culture references.
Those are fun.
Things for me like that there are a few things that I have kept from early drafts. Okay, so nobody knows this. This is the first time I'm going to admit this. So this is a mysterious Galaxy exclusive. But this book actually started as a dark comedy, and it was about a group of girls who wanted to resurrect their favorite pop star who had died, which is like so
brilliant,
so different than
very different. Yeah.
Well, it did take my previous agent saying like, I think this needs to be like straight up horror because you've got some really cool ideas here. But there is a little there is like one line that you guys might know, you guys might notice it, but there is one line that like if you didn't know that this was originally about a pop star, you'd be like, oh, whatever. But if you now knowing, it's like, oh, that line stayed, and it makes me kind of laugh when I think of it. So we'll talk about it later because it would be kind of like a spoiler, but yeah.
A spoiler, yeah. I'm very, very interested. And just as a reminder, and very shortly we're going to start going to audience Q&A. So there's a little ask a question like box at the bottom. So go ahead and drop your questions in there, and we're going to be getting to those very soon.
Oh my gosh, are there 6 questions? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we already have 6.
Yeah. I was like, what is that?
I was like, oh, we're doing fine. Okay, I got distracted. All right. So for writers, there's usually some kind of ritual that goes into like getting into the mindset and being able to like creatively create. I'm interested in what that looks like for you. Do you have like playlists that you put on? Is there like a certain jacket or like a hoodie you need to wear? Is there a certain like setup?
That is good. You know that now I didn't think that I had a certain sweater, but now that you mentioned, I'm like, oh, I do always put that sweater on, huh? I get cold very easily, even in Florida. I don't know what it is, but I have a hard time actually listening to music while drafting, while like outlining or like plotting stuff, like just jotting down notes. It's totally fine, but I can't listen to lyrics because I'll just like sing. I'll just do karaoke for myself, or like I'll start writing the lyrics. So I actually have to listen to like scores or like like video game scores, like movie scores and stuff like that. Although I do usually make a playlist. For this book, there was a lot of Florence and the Machine. I feel like that's obvious.
Oh my God, yeah, that's a huge artist that I use in writing my paranormal stuff too. How funny, yeah.
Right. Every time she releases a new album, I'm like, oh yes, this book's gonna be so good.
Like, oh, thank God. Let's update.
But she's got those like dark witchy vibes. A lot of hip hop and R&B. I usually don't listen to them while I'm writing, but I love to like, okay, this is Iris's playlist, this is Trent's playlist, and like seeing how different they are. Or I'll have like 2 characters playlists, and they've got some romantic songs for each other, but I mean the characters don't know that, right? Like they're like, oh, I don't like that person. But yeah, and I always have probably like 5 drinks. Like I need a water, I need a lemonade, I need my half full coffee from the morning. Like I go like everything with me and all the snacks. But yeah, I definitely put on a sweater. That's like my writing sweater. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a mechanical keyboard that like produces magic. I don't know how, but when I have that, clicky. There's rainbow lights on it. It's very exciting.
I use like a boring black, like it's like ergonomic, like really ugly keyboard.
Is it like the separated hands one?
It's together, but there is a separation, and it's kind of like curved, and it's. I mean, you know what? It is great. It is great. I used to have a clicky one, and then I was like, man, my I almost said ankles, my wrists are like, I need to get a real like ergonomic keyboard.
Oh my God, you like type like how you're supposed to type. I think I type kind of like a gremlin. I'm just like all over the place.
I used to do like, I used to love having long nails, but then it was like, oh yeah. So now I'm just like stubbies. Yeah.
You're like, oh well, that's how we know when you're drafting is when your nails are all cut down.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, another wonderful thing about the Witchery is its cover. It is stunning. I fell in love with it when you announced it, and I lost it. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Me too.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the process of getting the cover was like?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I know, I mean, I didn't have like final say on the cover or anything like that.
Yeah, we never do.
I had heard like, you know, some people say like you're not going to have any input. Scholastic actually, they had me make a document, which was like, they were like, yeah, do you have some character references? I was like, baby, I've got a 10-page document.
You're like,
what
I
do
have
you
a whole
mean?
like book Bible if you would like to
Yeah,
see it.
yeah. So I was able, and it was important to me to make sure, you know, they had hired a Black illustrator, making sure like Iris's skin tone was correct and all that stuff. Like, so I had provided quite a few references of just like actors, models, you know, people that looked or had the same vibes as the girls. And I love the font. Actually, was my favorite thing for a while. Obviously, the girls look incredible, but I loved like how the Witchery is set on the page. And the back cover,
it's the back
beautiful
cover.
blurb.
Oh God! Well, I mean, yes, the blurb, but the back cover is so cool.
We got like, all the craft vibes. And,
yes, literally.
You know, I didn't really have. I had actually a very good experience with the cover, so I didn't have a ton of like, no, this needs to go, this needs to be gone. Like, I was like, that's awesome. Let's go with it. Like, I was so happy. And Thea Harvey, shout out to Thea who did the US cover, did such a fantastic job, and I was just really lucky to have her in my corner. And Steph Yang who designed it. Always got to make sure to shout out the people behind the cover, right?
All the time. I'm constantly screaming about Mars Lauterbach, who's done a lot of my covers at this point. So,
nice.
Yeah, it's like singing of the praises as they deserve. Okay, this is a question I'm going to skip around a little bit, but this is a question that is I'm always personally interested in when I'm talking to other author friends. But are there any scenes you had to cut, or were there any scenes that you wanted to add or didn't have space for? I feel like I'm constantly battling my word with what I actually want to do.
I definitely still have that document of like, I usually call it like cuts or scraps, where it's like things I've removed, but maybe I'll save for like a, you know, like a special thing in the future. There were a lot of scenes that were just like the 6 kids just like hanging out and joking around, which I feel like I managed to kind of infuse into the plot anyway. But like, I kind of had to be like, oh, this doesn't move the plot along. It's so fun. And if this were a movie, like maybe you'd be a lot quicker and maybe you could get that in, but I need these words, I need these pages. So there was a scene where a character, this is like really old, I don't even think it made it into like a draft that my editor had seen, but there was a scene where one of the characters had gotten sick and her kind of love interest wanted to nurse her back to health, but then Jayla got very protective. Was like, no, I'm going. It was just sort of like friends versus the guys sort of scene, and it was a lot of fun and just very like teens being teens. So maybe one day that will be in like a special like newsletter or something. But a lot of the scenes that were cut. It was funny. It was just for me though, really. Most of the scenes that I had to cut they were necessary to cut. It was just kind of like the kids hanging out. So, you know, okay.
I was like, at first I was like, oh my God, a hurt comfort vibe. But then I love how Jayla comes in and she's like, absolutely not.
No, we've got it. We've got it. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got this covered.
Mundane cures. You're bringing Tylenol? Like, no, we're witches.
Like, you're out of your league here, friend.
Right.
So for people who enjoy The Witchery, what are some books that you think they would like reading if they like The Witchery? Do you have any book recommendations?
Great question. 1, Deep in Providence by Riss Nielsen.
You're so right.
I love what's the why am I blanking? The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson, which is, granted, that one is adult, much darker. But I'm here for just like all the Black witches, honestly. Like I could go through the list. I'm excited for Ashton Brophy's How to Succeed in Witchcraft.
I've read that one.
Have you read it? Oh.
It's so good. Every time it comes up, I keep saying this, but there is a hair washing scene in that book that I think about constantly. It is so romantic and oh my God, I think about it all the time. It's very good.
Yeah, and so I'm always like shouting these books out, and those like Riss and Alexis and Ashlyn are just like, I just want my book to be in conversation with theirs. So yeah, those are the ones I really love. I'm trying to think of what else.
I would say Blood Like Magic by Lizelle Sandbury in terms.
Oh my gosh!
Because you know, blood magic and et cetera, et cetera. Yes. But that's a really good one too. One of my favorites. One of my favorites.
And
if you like,
we have the same cover artist actually, which I think is very cool. Yeah,
that is really cool. Both of her covers are also so stunning.
Yeah, Harvey. Mm-hmm.
It's so good. What I love so much about Blood Like Magic is like if you like the old school early aughts paranormal books, but you want them to be better, Blood Like Magic is your solution.
You know, it's funny because, like I mentioned, I'm a teen librarian, and our teen floor is made to look like a bookstore, so it's separated by genre. So there we have a paranormal section, and it's hilarious to go through it and be like, man, we were struggling.
I mean, truly.
But you know, but they still get checked out. I have teens that come to me and they're like, have you heard this show, The Vampire Diaries? I'm like, when I was in high school, that was my everything. And they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, all those CW shows. And one of them was like, what's a CW? And I was like, that's the channel that the show's on. They're like, no, it's on Netflix. And I'm just like, guys,
you're just like,
let's do our homework.
That's rough. That's real rough.
It's so funny. Yeah.
Okay, so to close out my questions for you before we go into the Q&A, what's next? And like, what else have you been working on? What are you allowed to share with us?
Okay, so at this point, I mean, I've just shared this with everyone. It's not officially announced, but there is a sequel to The Witchery. Hallelujah.
God.
Hallelujah. Yes. I know.
Oh, I'm so excited.
It's so hard. And I will say it is something that I had initially conceived as more than one volume. But I didn't sell a duology. I'm really just putting it all out there. It's fine. Scholastic. Bear with me, okay? I'm tired of keeping the secret.
You're doing great.
But and so when Scholastic came through and was like, we want a sequel, I was like, I've got it. So I'm working on that. Hopefully next fall, I think. And when you read the book and when you read the ending, it is, I hope, feels close, but there is going to be like obvious like seeds for future volumes. So there is a sequel. I'm writing some other things in different genres. I love YA. That's where my heart is. I'm writing like historical YA. Oh, cool. I'm writing adult fantasy. I hate answering what's next because my brain's always like, well, I've got 10 ideas. So
you're like, well, which folder do you want me to like open?
Right. But most immediately, if you like The Witchery and you're like, man, I want more of this world, just know that there is a sequel. I'm working on it. So coming your way soon.
Yeah, I think it was a very similar experience with Cemetery Boys. I'm like, here's the standalone. And then they're like, what if you did a sequel? And I was like, I don't know.
Okay. When you announced that, I was like, guys, we're having more of them. I think I called Yadriel Yads in an interview once, and I was just like, I'm part of the group. I don't.
No, yeah, totally.
But I just, like I mentioned, I love that book so much. So when you announced that, I was like, Aiden!
Yeah, I feel awful for my editor because 2 times before she tried to buy a sequel, but I couldn't come up with a story because people loved and connected with Cemetery Boys on such an important and deep level. I didn't want to just do a sequel to like make money off of it. I wanted to write a sequel that really did the original justice and that like people could like really like sink their teeth into. So it took me several years before, and like in a fever dream, I like woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, oh my God, I have an idea. And I immediately like emailed my agent. And then,
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I am so excited. Look, if those early copies come through.
I will absolutely send you one. Don't you worry about that.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're going to transition to some audience questions. Oh, this is fun. Teens are terrifying, but also underestimated. Oh no. Okay, there we go. I was like, oh God, it disappeared. I work in the YA section of a bookstore. What's your favorite teen interaction or moment you've had, either as a librarian or touring as an author?
This is a great question. As an author, I will say, at my event with Ryan at Books and Books, I was an in-person event on Wednesday. I had a 14-year-old Elena, And she came up and she was just like, you know, she hadn't read the book yet, but she was like, I am so excited for your book. And she was so adorable. And it just was like, that's one of the first, aside from like my library teens, like teen reader interactions, you know, the book hasn't been around for very long. So to have like a teen come up and say like, I already love the sound of this book. It's everything I want. You know, she's a writer. She was asking for advice. It was just like the coolest, sweetest moment. And that reminder of like who we're writing things for. As far as in the library, my teens are so goofy. I will never forget the one time that I used to, before COVID, during summers especially, we would play video games and I would order pizzas in. And one time I accidentally called pizza toppings pizza flavors, and they would not weeks, months. Remember Miss Sophie? Oh, pizza flavors. And that's just like, it's always a very silly interaction. I've had other interactions where teens are like, you know, they've told me about the impact I've made on their lives. And stuff. The really heartfelt stuff is also very important to me. But that moment just sticks with me. Just like being a teen librarian means anything you say will be used against you. Pizza flavors, don't do it.
Yeah, teens are so good at just like dunking on you. I think my favorite is how you can get absolutely dragged just by like being referred to as like by something that you're wearing is the big one for me. Like God, that happened recently. I can't remember what it was that I had on, but for example, they're like, okay, orange shirt, and it's just like you're just wearing an orange shirt, but they're clowning on you with like in such a catastrophic way. It's just like, oh.
I've had that happen. I have been told I dress like an abuela because I was wearing a floral dress. I was like, this is comfortable. Or they'll say, like, okay, Converse. I'm like, I don't wear Converse.
It was like, well, what the heck?
Yeah, I really do. I love being a teen librarian. And yeah, they can be terrifying, but I think part of, you know, like this book is like, they're terrifying, but they are also trying to just like live.
Totally.
So, you know, let him be.
Okay, here's another good one. As both authors mentioned, writing multi-POV, oh my gosh, I wish I could talk. Writing multi-POV books is hard to do. How did you approach balancing 6 different viewpoints from a craft perspective? That's a great question.
Yeah.
I would also like to know.
It is a great question. And I will say it's something for this book that fit, and it's just how the book came to me. So I was very stubborn and worked very hard to make it work because I didn't want to, you know, go on sub and then have an editor be like, well, this character is not like, that was my biggest fear, was having someone say like, you don't really need this character. So I'm thankful that didn't happen. But the biggest advice I can give is probably the most obvious advice, which is to make sure that each character has a story, a storyline, a plot individually before you even put them into the group. So whether it's a mysterious past or they've got a connection with another character, making sure that they can stand on their own. And obviously your mileage may vary. Like I'm sure there are readers who are like, oh, this character is not my favorite or whatever. But I just wanted to make sure everyone had a reason for being there so that nobody could tell me you had to cut them. I would also say one thing I did in this book is, you know, it's kind of like 2 friend groups. So to make it less confusing or overwhelming, I had the characters around each other a lot. Or like, let's say it's a Talia chapter and she's alone. She's going to be thinking about what, you know, Logan, Iris, and Jayla are doing. Or Matthew and Trent are together all the time. They're roommates. If Trent's off doing something, he might recall something Matthew said or might get a text from him. So that at least it felt like, you know, there's also the problem when you've got like 6 different characters and, you know, it's the Game of Thrones thing where they're all in different lands. And how are they going to relate? But for this, I hope that teens are able to kind of latch on pretty quickly because it's like a friend group and they're getting all of the traits in each other's characters or each other's like POV chapters. So yeah, that's the best advice I can give. Probably won't be doing 6 again after the sequel. I think I'm going to stick to 2 at most.
I mean, yeah, again, I'm
hard.
trying to do 2 and it's real hard. It's hard out here.
So what's your advice then? I know 2 and 6, I guess is different, but I still feel like you need to make sure each character has a reason, right, for being
Totally.
a POV. Yeah.
So I don't know about you, but I'm a huge plotter. I plot my stories to death. Like,
no, this is the problem with multi-POV is I'm not a plotter.
Well, see, so it's like in order to track any of this, I need to have everything really lined out. So I have like my main outline, I have my chapters broken down, but then I also color code things to the characters, their arcs, tracking items that they picked up, that kind of stuff like that. I track everything with colors, bookmarks, headings, all that kind of stuff. So like really like outlining it to death is how I can like manage both of them. And again, this is the first time I've ever done it, so I don't know if I'm doing it right or well. But
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are.
The two POV characters are having their own separate journeys, and then they're going to come together and finish out the book together. So what I'm doing is actually, even though it's going to be alternating chapters, I'm writing one character's story first, the second characters, and then the ones that are together will be back and forth.
That's cool.
Is that how to do it? I mean, so far it's fine. I don't know if that's good advice though, because I'm not done writing it. So.
No, I think that's good too. And there were times with the Witchery where I was like, I need to focus on Logan right now. I'm just gonna write all of hers and get that down. And there is a question about is there an app you use? I know for me, I love Scrivener. I think there's something called Plotter without an E, maybe.
Yeah.
That kind of does the color coding thing just digitally. Anything else you use, or are you on paper?
Oh no! Oh gosh, no! I don't even know if I know how to write by hand anymore. But I use Google Docs, and I just use the heading tool and changing font colors and stuff like that. And it's very helpful.
Nice.
Let me see. I like this question a lot. You've mentioned you're a teen librarian. What do you often hear from teens on what they want to read? And what do they want or desire in certain genres, including paranormal?
That is interesting. One thing I hear, okay, so I'll say that every teen is different. Yeah. So, sometimes I'll see conversations on Twitter, these blanket statements, and I think sometimes it's hard for us to stop thinking about like ourselves as a teen. Like, for example, when I was a teen, I was reading the tomes. I was walking around school with these massive books for my like leisure reading and just thinking I was so cool. And so it took becoming a teen librarian to realize, a lot of kids don't want massive books, or some of them do, some of them don't. And so I think it's important to make sure we have everything on the shelf for them. One thing I hear often is less romance. And so, which is interesting because I feel like romance is so hot right now in teen, like especially like the fantasy romance. I've always said that the Witchery is, it's got your little touches. Isn't it what you say, kiss of romance in your blurb?
Oh,
it's got you're like, I forgot writing that. I did say that. But it is mostly about friendship, and there are some teens that also love romance though. So that's why I want to say like everyone's different. One thing that was interesting, I had a camp come in. I get like summer camps that come in, and they do library visits. It's very, very cool. And they're allowed to check out a bunch of books on their like camp library card. But there was a girl who was like, I need to cry. I need to feel pain. I want tragedy. And I was like, okay, I don't remember what I think I gave them some Adam Silvera, actually.
I was about to say, when you said that, I immediately thought of Adam. Yeah.
And then I was like, well, do you want it to be like you want to be sobbing, or I think they had asked for romance first. I was like, you want rom-com or do you want like tragedy? And they're like, I want tragedy. And then the friends were like, ooh, yeah, me too. Like it was just like this group of girls that were like, we want to be emotionally wrecked. And it was hilarious because I'll turn around and there'll be a teen that's like, no, I need the fluff. Give me the fluff. So, but the one thing I will say is mostly like, I think because YA is so romance heavy, that sometimes it can be hard to remember that there are teens that don't want a ton of romance. Totally. And then just keep on bringing the tragic tales, guys.
They like being sad. I don't know.
Yeah, it's cathartic, I think.
I totally agree. Sometimes, when I feel like just being emotionally devastated, I always reread The Song of Achilles, which also has a devastating audiobook.
And I think that reader had already was like, where is that book? Because I was like, it's not a teen book. It's on the first floor, the fourth floor. Yeah, it was always interesting when the teens, you can tell who's on Book Talk or whatever, because they're coming in with all those titles and you're like, I got them. I know.
You're like, here comes the TikTok wave.
Yeah. Exactly.
I like this question a lot, and I'm very curious, since you have revealed that you're kind of a pantser writer. In your drafting process, do you tend to write chronologically, like in order of events, or do you write scenes and map things out as they come to you?
Okay, so this is a really good question. I usually when it's like, okay, I've got an idea, there's usually like a few scenes that is like propelling me to write, or like encouraging me, and these are usually like the end or like the plot twist. So I will usually write those.
The dangling carrot.
Exactly, or just like notes. I'm trying to plot a murder mystery right now, a YA murder mystery, and it's like I've got these like 3 scenes. This document, this like Google Doc actually for once, has like the beginning prologue, and then like the only other thing on the page is like the big twist reveal, and that's all I've written. So I need to just like fill it in, but everything else is going to be mostly chronological. So I usually just have a few scenes that are kind of what are most vivid to me, and then I'll go through and mostly write chronologically. I can't jump too much. I think because I'm a pantser, I'm like, if I move away from the timeline, I'm gonna lose it all. So I just need to keep going. Although I'm more of a plancer now, is what I say, because when you're on deadline, everything changes. I can't.
Yeah,
can't really do that anymore.
Suddenly, you have to like focus your creative energy into a specific time allotment, and that is definitely tricky.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's rough out here, folks. Let's see here. How was the research process like for The Witchery? Was there anything you had to research or look into?
This is another really good question. It's so for this book, so it takes place in present day. So there was definitely a lot of like, okay, this is a Florida town, but it's fictional. There was a lot of like, even though I'm a Floridian, like researching some of this stuff just to make sure it was right. There was a lot of like language translation kind of stuff that I played off of. Although this book isn't so much like, I'm not pulling from one folktale or one piece of history like Salem Witch Trials. I know is very popular to write fiction about. I'm not really pulling from that. So most of the research was like, okay, I need poisonous plants, or I need to know like stuff like that. Like that's kind of a spoiler. If a car were to crash, like what would that be like? So it was more of that kind of technical stuff. But a lot of the Witchery, like the world is pretty simple. I wanted it to be attractive to a teen who maybe wasn't the biggest fantasy reader. So I try to keep things pretty simple. A lot of the research was more on like just technical, like everyday kind of fiction things. So,
I totally run into that all the time. For SUNBEARER, I can't tell you how many hours I spent learning about tropical birds of Mexico and like what they eat, what they sound like.
Oh my gosh.
What they look like. It was wild. Just hours upon hours.
Right, and you wouldn't have thought, you would have never guessed that. Or like, I mean, I guess me researching poisonous plants, you might guess that. But most of it wasn't even like the big witchy stuff. I was just like, okay, so what time does the sun set? What month?
Literally,
like, solstice is this? Calendars.
It's something that'll take like one line in your book, but you'll spend hours trying to like really nail down and make sure that you have correct. That
exactly same
drives me cuckoo bananas. It's really hard. This is also a good one. All of these questions are good, actually. What are some things that fascinate or drew you to witches? Or why is the paranormal still fascinating to this day?
Oh man, so playing off of kind of what I had said before about being bored as a teen, I love the idea, like paranormal specifically. I read all the paranormal things growing up, and I love this idea of like a world like ours, just with magic, right? So not entirely different, not like otherworld fantasy, but like I want to be able to levitate things to myself. Like I, stuff like that. And I was always like, oh, that person was like, I wanted to go into the wardrobe and be transported into a different world, but be able to come back. Like, I don't want to like leave my family. I want to be able to have both the magic and the real. So I think paranormal, this idea of like a vampire looks like us, but drinks blood, or a witch, having magic, werewolves. I love that mixture of real world and supernatural world. So I think paranormal is always going to be like a sweet spot for me, even if it's just like what I read, Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something just so inherently exciting about the idea that any one of us going through our day-to-day could be met with something that's paranormal, or like there's magic or something hidden like just out of sight. And how something could happen and suddenly we could enter that world. I think that that's a really fun and exciting thing about the paranormal genre. It's a good time.
I love it. Yeah.
It's really good. If Yadriel and Julian entered the Witchery, what would they think of the Witches and the Red Three?
I am prepared for this question.
Okay.
I think they would all be besties. Like, honestly, I want to see like Julian and like Iris like just crack up and just like, well, together just being like, you're annoying, but we're best friends now, right? Like that would be my dream. I think Yadriel would be perfect for like to hang out with like Jayla and be like I think they would be best friends. There was another question I got like this. I think it was with Bethany Sumaro, and we were talking about our characters and like how they would interact. So this is always such a fun question. So yeah, I think they would all just like get into mischief together, and it would be
so much mischief. Honestly, yeah, and especially because I think Julian is so excitable and is, I think, anytime he runs into anybody for the rest of his existence who has some kind of magic, he's going to be like, tell me everything.
He's like, I think actually him and Trent, maybe they're like two alike, but I feel like we would also have a good time because they're just like, okay, Iris, you're a death witch. Can you just like call some ghosts? Like, let's see it.
Like,
let's do
what can we do with this? Like, it's a Friday night. Let's get some Cheetos and let's summon some spirits.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think, I think he'd be very intimidated to begin with, especially by Iris. But I think he would warm up really quick. And I think Julian would really be a really good buffer for that. Yeah. Even if he just like makes eye contact with someone and is like, isn't he annoying? Like some way to like bond.
Now I want this to happen. I just need someone write a fan fiction, please. Just like give us our multiverse of madness.
Let's make it happen. Okay, so I'm on to our last question. I heard Aiden mention urban fantasy in the 2000s. What were some stuff that you liked about the genre during that time, or should make a comeback? I would love to know what kind of books you were reading back in the dark days of the paranormal genre.
Yeah, now that I think about it, it was more like I was watching the shows. Because I remember trying to read Vampire Diaries and being like, oh, this is a little bit different. I know we're talking about urban fantasy, but I was a big Twilight fan to the point, like, I remember there was a girl in my class who was writing, like, I love Edward on a science table. And I was like, well, what's that? And she was like, never heard of Twilight. And then it took the high school by storm. So again, it's a different genre, but like, okay, so one thing I always love a good paranormal story. I love, like we mentioned before, that world being next to our world or beneath it, that whole City of Bones, like underworld. But I didn't love the lack of diversity, of course. I didn't love that everyone was, from the books that I knew of, straight and white. So that's part of the reason why I wrote this book, I think you can probably tell. And just, again, sort of talking about like focusing not totally on romance, but being able to have some really healthy friendships as well. And, male characters who aren't just brooding in the corner watching you sleep.
Isn't that nice?
Which I was like, oh my God, Edward, he just loves her. Now I'm like, girl,
stalker, you gotta get out of it. It's not safe. I'm trying to think of like the books that I was like really obsessed with when in like the 2000s, so a very long time ago. And I was obsessed with Amelia Atwater Rhodes. I don't know. Okay. She was 16 when she published these books. There's like In the Force of the Night, but Demon in My View was like my favorite book. And they're these really awful vampire books that are like this thick. They're super short. And like I like remembered them recently, and I like bought a couple. And I was like, oh my god, I loved those. I like got them and started reading them, and I was like, what was I doing? I was like, these are bad. But
so sorry, go ahead.
No, but those were like a big series for me, and I was so obsessed with Amelia Atwater Rhodes. And she even like had a self-insert character in my favorite book, which was Demon in My View. Like literally the main character was a girl who wrote books about vampires, and then it turned out that vampires were real. And I was like, yes, this is what I want. This is amazing.
That's actually a very fun plot.
Right?
I like that.
Unfortunately,
maybe I'll pick it
up. But yeah, I mean, if for a good time, that's going to take you only a couple hours, because truly they are the smallest little books.
We've got the link. We've got
there we go.
I'm about to order these books, man. I wonder if my library has them. Again, I told you, like, I was going through the paranormal section. I was like, I don't even know some of these books, but I would check, and they still circ. And last thing I'll say about Twilight is that when I was a new teen librarian, I was doing an outreach book club with a group of girls. And I was like, guys, what are we going to read? What way do you want to read? And they're like, we want to read Twilight. And I was like, tell me more. Why are we doing this? And they were like, well, like, because they had missed it. They had missed the phenomenon. So they were literally just like, we just want to see what everyone's talking
What's all
about.
this fuss about? Yeah.
Yeah, they were just kind of like, well, was it that good? And I was like, that's a complicated question.
You're like, it's not. That's not what we're unpacking.
That's not what we're talking about.
We're just here for a good time.
And it's funny because we ended up not finishing it. There were some other things, not because of the book itself, but I remember I went back home because I was like, I know I still have these damn paperbacks, and I started reading them, and I was like, I felt the nostalgia so heavily. It's wild how books stick with you, but I am so glad that I can point to so many authors of color who are doing the genre, who are writing inclusively, and I'm glad that that's not like the only vampire book that we have, or the only paranormal, so.
Yeah, and I think that's a really wonderful thing about what you and I are so lucky to be entering publishing right now, is that we are diversifying our stories so much. Mm-hmm. And it's nice because finally, BIPOC authors are having the opportunity to tackle these tropes that have been around for a really long time, but never from our perspectives. And I think that that's something that is really cool and really exciting. And The Witchery is such an important and a fun addition
thank you.
To that tome. That lexicon, really. I am so excited that it's out in the world. And I think at this point we gotta wrap it down. So
we timed that so well. Yes.
That was perfect. Oh my gosh. Oh man, everyone that submitted those wonderful questions, great job.
Thank you guys.
And I swear, after listening to that conversation, how can you not buy this book? How can you not? There's everything in it.
Come on.
And that's true. Looking at the cover, I'm like, okay, there's a bit of a craft. And I didn't even look at the back of the cover. Like, oh my god, that's my bad.
I'm obsessed.
Thank you so much. I have one last question for you both, just in case. Where can people find you on social media?
Sophie,
I am on Twitter and Instagram. My handle on both is Isabelle Writes. My website is Isabelle Books. I have not joined the TikTok crowd yet. Maybe one day, but you can find me on Twitter and Insta and on my website for now.
And I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. It feeds into my chaos energy really well. And my handle is Aiden Schmaden, because I didn't know we were supposed to have professional handles as writers. So you can find me there. Yeah.
Who needs to be professional these days? Come on. We've lived through the pandemic times. Just do whatever you like.
Whatever makes you happy.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you so much, Aiden. This was such a wonderful event. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, Sophie. So stoked for you.
Just want to say, guys, support your indie bookstores.
Yes.
Please.
Indies. We love you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Support your librarians. Give lots of love to your librarians because
going through it.
Thank you so much, everyone. We hope to see you next time for a next virtual or in-store event. Have a good night. Bye.
Good night.